The morning sun cast golden rays across the riverside farmers market, transforming the ordinary Saturday into something magical. Vendors arranged their colorful displays of autumn vegetables, bright orange pumpkins, deep purple eggplants, and ruby red tomatoes that glistened with morning dew. The air was filled with the intoxicating aroma of fresh-baked bread, cinnamon, and locally roasted coffee. Street musicians played cheerful folk music near the fountain, and children's laughter echoed between the white canvas tents. Sarah Martinez navigated through the crowd with her 3-year-old daughter Emma's small hand tucked safely in hers. Sarah, a dedicated nurse at Riverside Community Hospital, cherished these Saturday mornings, her only full day off during the week. After 6 months of struggling to rebuild their lives following the devastating house fire that had destroyed their home and scattered their family, these simple moments felt precious. Emma skipped beside her mother, her pink jacket zipping back and forth as she pointed excitedly at everything. "Mommy, look, puppies," Emma squealed, tugging toward a pet adoption booth. "Not today, sweetie," Sarah replied gently, her heart aching. They'd lost so much in the fire, including their beloved dog Buddy. She couldn't bear to replace him yet, and their temporary apartment didn't allow pets anyway. "How about we get some apple cider instead?" Emma's face lit up, and they made their way to Mrs. Henderson's stand, famous for her spiced cider. The elderly woman beamed at Emma, offering her a small cup with a wink. "Extra cinnamon, just how you like it, precious." While Emma sipped her cider, Sarah browsed the homemade jams, mentally calculating whether she could afford a jar with this week's tight budget. The hospital had reduced her hours, and money was constantly on her mind. She picked up a jar of strawberry preserves, examining the price tag with a frown. That's when her phone rang. Sarah glanced at the screen, Riverside Community Hospital. Her stomach tightened. They only called on her day off if it was urgent. She answered, pressing one finger to her other ear to block out the market noise. "Sarah, it's from scheduling," the voice said urgently. "I know it's your day off, but we have an emergency. 3 nurses called in sick and were critically understaffed in the ER. Any chance you could come in?" Sarah closed her eyes, torn between her desperate need for the overtime pay and her precious time with Emma. "I'm at the market with my daughter. I don't have available in." "We really need you, Sarah. Double-time pay for emergency coverage. I know things have been tight since the fire." Double time. That could cover their overdue electric bill and maybe new shoes for Emma, whose toes were pressing against the ends of her current pair. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe her neighbor could watch Emma for a few hours. "Let me make a call and I'll get back to you in 5 minutes, Sarah said, already mentally rearranging her day. She kept hold of Emma's hand, or so she thought, as she immediately dialed her neighbor's number. Emma had finished her cider and was watching a street magician perform tricks with colorful scarves a few feet away. The magician made a blue scarf disappear and pulled out a red one, and Emma giggled with delight. Sarah's neighbor didn't answer. She tried another friend. Voicemail. Her mother lived 3 hours away. She was so focused on her mental checklist of possible babysitters, so consumed by the stress of their financial situation, that she didn't notice her grip had loosened on Emma's hand. Emma, mesmerized by something fluttering near the edge of the market, took one step away from her mother. Then another. A beautiful orange and black monarch butterfly danced on the breeze, landing briefly on a basket of flowers before taking flight again. To Emma's 3-year-old eyes, it was the most magical thing she'd ever seen. She had to follow it. Just for a second, Emma thought in her simple, childlike way, "Mommy's busy talking. I'll be right back." The butterfly led her between 2 vendor stalls, past the kettle corn stand where the wonderful smell of caramel made her pause briefly, and around the corner where the crowd thinned out. Emma could still hear the music and voices, so in her mind, she wasn't lost. She was just following the pretty butterfly. Meanwhile, Sarah finished her 3rd unsuccessful call and looked down to tell Emma they'd have to skip the playground today if she took the hospital shift. Her hand was empty. For a moment, Sarah's brain couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. She looked around, expecting to see Emma right there, maybe a few feet away looking at something. "Emma," she called, her voice still calm. "Emma, honey, where are you?" No response. "Emma," Sarah's voice rose sharply. Several nearby shoppers turned to look. "Emma." The jam jar slipped from Sarah's other hand and shattered on the pavement, red preserve spreading like blood across the concrete. Sarah spun in a circle, her nurse's training keeping her just barely functional even as panic clawed at her throat. Has anyone seen a little girl, 3 years old, brown curly hair, pink jacket? Her voice was climbing toward hysteria. People began shaking their heads, looking around with growing concern. Mrs. Henderson rushed over. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Emma's gone, she was just here, Emma." Officer Jake, who had been demonstrating K-9 training techniques with his German Shepherd Rex at the community policing booth, heard the commotion and immediately understood the tone of that scream. Every parent's worst nightmare. He grabbed Rex's lead and ran toward the sound, his radio already at his lips. "Dispatch, this is at the farmer's market. We have a report of a missing child. Female, approximately 3 years old. I need all available units and I'm initiating lockdown protocol now." Sarah saw the officer approaching and stumbled toward him, her legs barely holding her up. "My daughter, she was right here. I was just on the phone. Oh God, she was right here." Her voice broke into sobs. The cheerful market sound seemed to distort and fade as Sarah's world collapsed into a single, terrifying reality. Emma was gone. Officer Jake had seen this look before, the absolute terror in a parent's eyes when their child vanishes. In his 15 years on the force, he'd responded to dozens of missing child cases. Most ended well within the first hour, kids found hiding in clothing racks or wandering just outside the search perimeter. But some didn't. And the first 60 minutes were absolutely critical. "Ma'am, I need you to focus for me," said firmly but kindly, gripping Sarah's shoulders as she hyperventilated. "What's your daughter's name?" Emma Martinez. She's 3, just turned 3 last month." Sarah's words tumbled out in a rush. She was wearing a pink jacket with butterflies on it, blue jeans and light-up sneakers, the ones that flash when she walks. She has curly brown hair in 2 ponytails with yellow ribbons. Was already radioing the description to dispatch while Rex, his German Shepherd partner, sat alert at his side, sensing the urgency. "How long has she been missing?" Sarah looked at her phone with shaking hands. I don't know, 5 minutes, maybe 10. I was on a call and I thought I was holding her hand, but..." Her voice cracked. "Oh God," I let go of her hand. "This is not your fault," said firmly. "Kids are quick. Now, does Emma have any medical conditions I need to know about? Does she know her address or phone number?" "No medical conditions. And no, she's only 3, she doesn't know our address yet. We've been in a temporary apartment since our house fire 6 months ago. She might not even know where home is anymore." Sarah's tears flowed freely now. She's shy around strangers. If someone approached her, she'd probably hide or freeze up. Nodded, processing this information quickly. A shy child wouldn't likely go willingly with a stranger, which was good, but it also meant she might not respond if people were calling for her, which complicated the search. Within 3 minutes, 2 more patrol cars screamed into the market parking lot, sirens wailing. Officers began establishing a perimeter, blocking all exits. No one would leave without being checked. Called for his supervisor, Sergeant Davis, who arrived within minutes and immediately began coordinating the response. "We're treating this as a critical missing child," Davis announced to the growing group of officers. "Full search protocol. Get Rex working." Grabbed Emma's small backpack from Sarah's trembling hands, pulling out a sweater. He held it to Rex's nose. "Rex, search, find her." The German Shepherd's nose worked frantically, processing thousands of scent molecules invisible to human detection. After a moment, Rex locked onto something and pulled hard on the leash, leading away from the central market area toward the eastern edge where the vendor stalls thinned out. Detective Maria arrived in an unmarked sedan, her expression grave. A veteran of 23 years, she specialized in crimes against children. She approached Sarah, who was being supported by Mrs. Henderson and another vendor. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm detective. I know this is terrifying, but I need you to think carefully. Has Emma ever wandered off before?" "Never," Sarah sobbed. "She always stays close to me. She's not adventurous like that. She's actually really cautious usually." "Any custody disputes? Anyone who might want to take her?" "No, her father died 2 years ago. There's no one." Sarah's face went pale. "You think someone took her?" "I'm covering all possibilities," said calmly. "Right now, the most likely scenario is that she wandered off following something that caught her attention. Children Emma's age have very short attention spans and can cover surprising distances quickly." By now, the entire market was in lockdown. Vendors had stopped selling and were actively searching their stalls. Shoppers were checking under tables, behind displays, inside vehicles. Someone had grabbed the market's PA system microphone. "Attention all market visitors. We are searching for a missing 3-year-old girl named Emma Martinez. She's wearing a pink jacket with butterflies, blue jeans, and light-up sneakers. If you see her, please notify the nearest police officer immediately. Do not leave the market area until you've been cleared by law enforcement." Sarah's phone began ringing. The hospital again. She stared at it with hollow eyes before declining the call. Nothing else in the world mattered except finding Emma. How had she been worried about an electric bill and overtime pay? How had she let go of her daughter's hand for even a second? Followed Rex through the market, past the last vendor stalls, toward the parking lot. The dog was moving with purpose, clearly tracking something. They passed through the parking area and toward a wooded section that bordered the market property. "Dispatch, we have a trail leading east into the wooded area behind the market. Request additional units for ground search," radioed. Within minutes, 6 more officers had joined the search, fanning out through the trees. Rex led them along a barely visible path, probably used by teenagers as a shortcut. The undergrowth was thick with fallen autumn leaves that crunched underfoot. Sarah insisted on following despite suggestion that she wait at the market. "I can't just stand there. I need to help find her." "Then stay close to me and don't touch anything," instructed. "If this becomes a crime scene, we can't have evidence contaminated." The words "crime scene" hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she pushed forward, calling Emma's name until her voice grew hoarse. The search expanded rapidly. A news helicopter appeared overhead, its cameras broadcasting to every television in the county. Emma's face flashed across social media, shared by the Riverside Police Department's official accounts. Within 20 minutes, it had been shared 10,000 times. Tips began flooding the police hotline, though most were well-meaning but unhelpful from other parts of town. Volunteers arrived, dozens of them, then hundreds. The market community was tight-knit, and word spread like wildfire. Parents brought their teenagers to help search. Retirees drove over from nearby neighborhoods. Someone arrived with a drone to search from above. Rex led nearly half a mile from the market, through the woods and into a residential area Sarah vaguely recognized. These were old houses, most of them well-maintained, but some showing signs of neglect. The trail led them down Maple Street, past carefully manicured lawns, and then toward a property that stood out dramatically from its neighbors. The house at the end of the block was a Victorian-era structure, once probably grand, now clearly abandoned. The yard was overgrown with weeds taller than a child. The fence had collapsed in several places, and several windows were broken. Graffiti marked the walls, and a "No Trespassing Property Condemned Demolition Scheduled" sign hung crookedly near what used to be the front gate. Rex pulled hard toward the house, barking urgently. His instincts screamed danger. He'd responded to this property before, complaints about squatters, drug activity, and suspicious persons. It wasn't a place where a 3-year-old should be anywhere near. All units possible location identified. Abandoned property, 847 Maple Street. Approach with caution, known squatter location. His hand moved instinctively to his weapon. Then they heard it. A dog barking from inside the house. Not Rex, another dog. The sound was aggressive, threatening, territorial. Sarah's face went white. Oh no, oh God, no, Emma's terrified of big dogs, if there's a dog in there with her. She tried to run toward the house but grabbed her firmly. Mrs. Martinez, we don't know what's in there. Let us do our job. The barking intensified, fierce and protective. Every officer present knew that sound. It was the bark of a dog defending its territory. If Emma had wandered into that house and surprised a guard dog or a stray, the situation could be deadly. Signaled for his team to form up. They would need to approach carefully, weapons ready, but also prepared for a potential dog attack. Animal control had been called, but they were 15 minutes out. They couldn't wait 15 minutes. Then, impossibly, cutting through the vicious barking, they heard something that made everyone freeze. A child's voice, small, clear, and remarkably calm. Emma's voice, coming from inside that house, speaking words they couldn't quite make out yet. But she wasn't screaming. She was talking. Officer Jake had handled hundreds of dangerous situations in his career, armed robberies, domestic violence calls, even a hostage situation 2 years ago that ended peacefully. But standing outside that decrepit Victorian house, hearing a 3-year-old girl's voice mixing with aggressive barking from an unknown animal, his hands trembled slightly as he checked his weapon. Everyone hold position, he commanded quietly into his radio. We have audio confirmation of the child inside. Unknown animal also present, sounds aggressive. I'm going in with and everyone else maintains perimeter. Sarah tried once again to push past detective. That's my daughter in there. I need to get to her. Held her back firmly but gently. Mrs. Martinez, if you go charging in there, you could startle whatever animal is inside and put Emma in more danger. These officers are trained for this. Let them work. But she's scared of dogs. If there's a stray in there, she'll panic and Sarah's voice broke off as the barking intensified, now mixed with what sounded like growling. Approached the house from the side, his boots crunching on broken glass and debris scattered across the overgrown lawn. The property was even worse up close than it had appeared from the street. The porch steps were rotting, several had collapsed entirely, and the front door hung at an odd angle on broken hinges. Graffiti covered the lower walls, mostly tags from local teenagers, but also more concerning symbols that suggested drug activity. Officer, a 10-year veteran, moved to cover the back entrance while Officer, the youngest member of their team, positioned herself near a side window. Hand signaled his approach pattern and they began their careful advance. Riverside Police called out loudly. If anyone is in this structure, make yourself known now. The barking exploded into a frenzy. It was definitely coming from the back of the house, probably a rear bedroom. But mixed with that threatening sound was Emma's voice again, clearer now that they were closer. She was saying something repetitive, the same phrase over and over, but still couldn't make out the words over the dog's aggressive response. Tested the front porch carefully, distributing his weight to avoid falling through the rotted boards. The smell hit him as soon as he pushed through the broken door. Mold, decay, animal waste, and something else he couldn't quite identify. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a nightmare of abandonment. The interior was worse than he'd imagined. Trash covered the floor, fast food containers, empty bottles, dirty blankets, and sleeping bags indicating multiple people had been squatting here. Needles glinted in his flashlight beam, confirming his drug activity suspicions. Water damage had destroyed most of the ceiling, and in several places he could see straight through to the second floor. The wallpaper, probably once elegant, hung in moldy strips. "Police, we're coming in," called again, moving slowly through what had once been a living room. The barking was coming from down a hallway to his left. Could see a partially open door at the end, maybe 30 feet away. His heart hammered as he advanced, his flashlight sweeping corners, checking for threats. Radioed that the back entrance was secure but also compromised, easy entry for anyone or anything. "Emma," called out. "Emma, honey, my name is Officer Jake. Your mommy sent me to get you. Are you okay?" The child's voice responded immediately, but not to him. She was still talking to the dog, her tone unchanged. Not frightened, not crying, just speaking in that same repetitive, calm pattern. Reached the hallway, his backup weapon trained on the partially open door. Through the gap, he could see movement, shadows cast by his flashlight, something large shifting position. The barking had changed slightly, becoming less aggressive but still clearly defensive. "Emma, I'm going to come into the room very slowly, okay? Don't be scared. I'm a police officer and I'm here to help you." He pushed the door open with his foot, keeping his weapon ready, and his flashlight revealed a scene that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The bedroom was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with one broken window letting in a shaft of dusty sunlight. The floor was covered with torn blankets, newspapers, and what looked like food scraps, evidence of an animal living here for some time. And in the center of the room stood Emma Martinez, her pink butterfly jacket bright against the gloom, her light-up sneakers flashing with each small movement. Facing her less than 3 feet away was the most terrifying dog had ever seen. The animal was massive, probably 70 or 80 pounds, though it was hard to tell because it was severely emaciated. Its ribs showed clearly through matted fur that might have once been brown and white, but was now mostly gray with dirt and grime. Scars crisscrossed its body, long pale lines that spoke of a hard life, possibly fighting, definitely suffering. Its face was square and powerful, marking it as some kind of pit bull mix, and its jaws were open, revealing teeth that could easily kill a small child. The dog stood between Emma and the only exit, its body language screaming protection and territorial aggression. Its hackles were fully raised, making it look even larger and more threatening. Once flashlight hit its eyes, they reflected green and the dog's growl deepened, a sound that came from deep in its chest, a clear warning to stay back. His mind raced through his training. Never make sudden movements around an aggressive dog. Don't make direct eye contact, it's seen as a challenge. Speak calmly, move slowly. But Emma was right there, well within the dog's strike range. One wrong move, one sound that startled the animal, and those powerful jaws could clamp down on the little girl before anyone could stop it. "Emma, honey, I need you to stand very still for me, okay?" said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Don't move toward the doggy." But Emma wasn't looking at him. She was completely focused on the dog, and to absolute horror she was smiling. Not the scared, frozen smile of a terrified child trying to appease a threat, a genuine, joyful smile. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," began. That's when Emma did something that made his blood run cold and caused Officer, watching from the window, to gasp audibly into her radio. Emma extended her small hand, palm down, directly toward the dog's face. The animal's growl intensified, and its body tensed as if preparing to lunge. "No," started to shout, but Emma spoke over him, her voice clear and filled with absolute confidence, as if she didn't see the danger at all. She said 2 words, the same 2 words she'd been repeating since they'd arrived. "Good boy." She said it with such conviction, such pure, innocent trust, that for a moment everyone froze, the backup officers, even Sarah, who could hear everything through the radio. Those 2 simple words, spoken without fear, without hesitation, as if this aggressive, terrifying animal was nothing more than a friendly pet. The dog's ears twitched at her words. Its growl wavered, becoming uncertain. Emma took a tiny step forward, her hand still extended. "Emma, stop." His voice cracked with urgency, but she didn't listen. "Good boy," she repeated, and incredibly, impossibly, her smile widened. "I found you." His finger moved to his weapon's trigger, knowing he might have to make a split-second decision that would haunt him forever. Take the shot and potentially save the child, or trust that somehow, impossibly, this little girl knew something he didn't. The dog took one step toward Emma, its massive head now inches from her vulnerable hand. Everyone held their breath. What happened next would change everything. Time seemed to fracture into slow motion. Officer's finger rested on the trigger, his training screaming at him to neutralize the threat, but something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the absolute lack of fear in Emma's voice, or the way she leaned forward rather than back, moving toward the danger instead of away from it. Whatever the reason, he held his fire for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. The pit bull's massive head moved closer to Emma's outstretched hand, its breath visible in the dusty shaft of sunlight streaming through the broken window. The dog's body language was changing, could see it even through his panic. The raised hackles were slowly lowering. The rigid, aggressive stance was softening, almost imperceptibly at first. "Good boy," Emma said again, and this time there was something else in her voice. Recognition, joy. "Good boy, Buddy, I knew you were here." Buddy. The name hit like a physical blow. His mind flashed back to 6 months ago, the Martinez house fire on Avenue. He'd been first on scene that night, pulling Sarah and Emma from the burning structure while Sarah screamed about her dog still being inside. They'd searched for hours after the fire was contained, but never found the animal. Sarah had reported him lost, presumed dead. Could this be the same dog? The pit bull's nose touched Emma's palm, and the transformation was instantaneous and miraculous. The growl cut off mid-rumble, replaced by a whimper, not threatening but plaintive, almost desperate. The dog's entire body language shifted from aggressive to something had never seen in a stray animal: recognition. Buddy's tail began to wag. Slowly at first, just the tip moving uncertainly, then faster, the whole back half of his body wiggling despite his emaciated condition. The vicious guard dog disappeared, replaced by something that looked unmistakably like a family pet reuniting with someone he loved. "Oh my God," officer whispered through the radio. "Sir, the dog's response. It knows her." Emma's face lit up with pure, unbridled happiness. "Buddy, you've been here the whole time. Mommy said you were lost, but I knew I'd find you." Without any hesitation, without any of the fear that should have been paralyzing a 3-year-old facing down a 70-pound fighting dog, Emma wrapped her small arms around Buddy's neck and buried her face in his matted fur. His weapon lowered slightly, his training warring with what he was witnessing. Every instinct told him this was impossible. Stray dogs, especially those that had been surviving on their own for months, especially pit bulls with clear signs of abuse and possible fighting history, did not behave this way. They were defensive, aggressive, dangerous. They attacked first and asked questions never. But Buddy wasn't attacking. He was nuzzling Emma's face, his tail wagging so hard his entire rear end was moving. The dangerous animal had vanished, replaced by what was clearly a beloved pet who'd been lost for half a year and had just found his family again. "What's your status?" Detective's urgent voice crackled through his radio. Outside, Sarah's screams could be heard even through the walls. "Respond." Finally lowered his weapon completely, his hands shaking with the adrenaline dump that followed mortal danger. "Stand down," he said into his radio, his voice hoarse. "The dog. It's not a threat. It's the family's lost dog. The Martinez dog from the house fire 6 months ago." There was a moment of stunned silence on the radio. Then chaos erupted outside as Sarah heard the news. Holstered his weapon and slowly approached Emma and Buddy, speaking softly. "Emma, honey, I'm going to come closer now, okay? I'm not going to hurt your dog." Emma looked up at him for the first time, her face streaked with happy tears and dirt from Buddy's fur. "This is my Buddy. He got lost in the fire, but I found him. Can we take him home now?" Buddy turned his attention to, and for a moment the officer saw the wariness return to the dog's eyes. But then Buddy's nose worked, catching scent mixed with Sarah's from when he'd been working with her at the market. The dog's tail resumed wagging, though more cautiously. "Easy boy," said gently, extending his own hand slowly. "I'm a friend, I'm here to help." Buddy sniffed his hand carefully, then licked it once, a tentative gesture of acceptance. Noticed the faded collar partially hidden under matted fur. He carefully turned the tag, reading the barely legible engraving. Buddy Martinez, 550-50147. It was true. This was Emma's dog. Against all odds, surviving alone in this abandoned house for 6 months, he'd stayed alive. And Emma, with a 3-year-old supernatural instinct and an extraordinary sense of smell her pediatrician had noted in her medical records, had somehow tracked him down across half a mile of city streets. "Stand down," radioed. "Situation secure. We need animal control for medical evaluation, not containment. And someone get Mrs. Martinez back here slowly. We don't want to spook the dog with too much chaos." Knelt down beside Emma, examining Buddy more carefully now. The dog was in rough shape, severely underweight, multiple scars suggesting he'd been in fights, probably with raccoons or other strays competing for food, and what looked like an infected wound on his left shoulder. But his eyes were alert and intelligent, and despite his condition, he was gentle with Emma, letting her hug him and pat his head without any sign of aggression. "Emma, can you tell me something?" asked gently. "How did you know Buddy was here? Your mommy thought you were at the market with her." Emma looked at him with those innocent 3-year-old eyes, as if the answer was the most obvious thing in the world. "I smelled him," she said simply. "We were looking at the jams and I smelled Buddy's smell, the way he smells after he plays outside, so I followed it. The butterfly helped me find the way." Shook his head in amazement. He'd heard about children with heightened senses of smell, but this was extraordinary. Emma had literally sniffed out her lost dog through a crowded farmer's market, across parking lots and wooded areas, to this specific abandoned house. The door burst open behind them and Sarah appeared, Detective barely holding her back. When Sarah saw Emma safe in his presence, and then saw Buddy, she let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and completely collapsed to her knees. "Buddy, oh my God, Buddy." The dog's reaction removed any remaining doubt. Buddy practically leaped across the room, his emaciated body somehow finding the energy to bound toward Sarah. He knocked into her with enough force to push her backward, his tail wagging frantically, his tongue licking every inch of her face as she sobbed and laughed simultaneously. "You're alive. Oh God, you're alive." Sarah wrapped her arms around the dog she'd mourned for half a year, not caring about the dirt, the matted fur, or the smell. Emma rushed over, and suddenly all 3 of them were in a heap on the filthy floor, mother, daughter, and dog, reunited against impossible odds. Found himself wiping his eyes, something he rarely did on duty. In 15 years of police work, he'd seen plenty of happy endings, but nothing quite like this. Officer was openly crying through the window, and even the hardened veteran was sniffing suspiciously. Detective pulled out her phone, snapping photos. "This is going to be the feel-good story of the year," she said, her own voice thick with emotion. 3-year-old tracks down lost dog with her nose, reunites family 6 months after devastating fire. But as watched the reunion, his mind was already working on the logistics. Buddy needed immediate veterinary care. The house would need to be secured and documented, and they needed to figure out how Buddy had survived for 6 months in this abandoned structure with no obvious food source. As if reading his thoughts, Buddy suddenly pulled away from Sarah and Emma, moving back toward the corner of the room where he'd been when they first arrived. He looked back at them, whimpered, and then disappeared behind a section of collapsed drywall. "What's he doing?" Sarah asked, confused. His instincts prickled. "Stay here," he instructed, following Buddy with his flashlight. Behind the drywall was a closet, its door long since removed. Inside, Buddy had created a nest of torn blankets, shredded newspapers, and what looked like old towels stolen from someone's clothesline. The nest was carefully constructed, almost artificially warm from layers of insulation. And curled up in the center of that nest, barely visible in the dim light, were 3 tiny puppies. His jaw dropped. "Detective, you need to see this." The puppies were young, maybe 4 weeks old, their eyes recently opened. They were small, vulnerable, and somehow, impossibly, alive. 3 little lives that should never have survived in these conditions, kept alive by a father who refused to abandon them even when abandonment meant freedom, food, and safety. "That's why he never came home," said softly. "He couldn't leave them." Sarah appeared behind him, gasping at the sight. Buddy gently picked up one puppy in his mouth, carrying it over to Emma as if making an introduction. The puppy wiggled and squeaked, and Emma's eyes went wide with wonder. "Mommy, Buddy has bobbies." The miracle had just become even more impossible. Not only had Buddy survived 6 months alone in an abandoned house, but he'd also somehow protected and kept alive 3 puppies in conditions that should have killed them all. Detective was already on her phone, calling for veterinary services and animal rescue. "We're going to need multiple transport carriers and immediate medical evaluation for all 4 animals." Looked at Sarah, whose face showed a mixture of emotions: joy at finding Buddy, amazement at the puppies, and dawning realization of the incredible devotion the dog had shown. "He stayed for them," Sarah whispered. "All this time, we thought he was dead or had run away, but he stayed to protect his bobbies." Emma was already sitting with all 3 puppies crawling over her, giggling as they licked her face with their tiny tongues. Buddy sat beside her like a proud father presenting his family, his tail still wagging despite his obvious exhaustion and malnutrition. Outside, news vans were arriving, drawn by police scanner reports of the missing child case. But what they were about to discover was a story far bigger than a simple rescue. This was a story about survival, devotion, and the unbreakable bond between a child and her dog. A bond so strong it transcended 6 months of separation, half a mile of city streets, and the impossible odds of survival. Radio dispatch with an update that would soon go viral across every news outlet in the country. "Missing child found safe. Family dog also recovered. You're not going to believe this one." He was right. No one would believe it. But in that filthy, abandoned house on Maple Street, surrounded by evidence of tragedy and loss, a miracle had just unfolded. And it all started with 2 simple words: "Good boy." The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows through the broken window of the abandoned house as doctor from Riverside Animal Emergency Services carefully examined Buddy and his 3 puppies. She'd arrived within 20 minutes of detective's call, her mobile veterinary unit parked as close to the house as the overgrown yard would allow. "This is remarkable," Doctor murmured, running her hands gently over Buddy's emaciated frame while Emma stood close by, refusing to leave his side. "He's severely malnourished, probably lost 30 to 40% of his body weight. These scars here and here suggest encounters with other animals, likely fighting over food sources. This wound on his shoulder is infected and needs immediate attention." Sarah knelt beside the examination, her hand resting on Buddy's head. The dog's eyes, despite everything he'd been through, remained alert and fixed on Emma. Every few seconds, he'd glance toward the corner where his puppies were being examined by doctor's assistant, as if counting them to make sure all 3 were still safe. "How did he survive?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. 6 months with no food, no water source that we can see, and he kept those puppies alive too." Doctor sat back on her heels, shaking her head in professional amazement. Honestly, Mrs. Martinez, I've been a veterinarian for 18 years and I've never seen anything quite like this. Based on what I'm seeing, Buddy's been scavenging, probably raiding trash cans, hunting small animals like rats and squirrels, maybe even catching birds. See these marks on his teeth? That's from cracking bones to get at the marrow. He was eating anything he could find. Officer, who'd been documenting the scene with photographs, paused at this. But the puppies, they're so young. How did they survive? They can't hunt for themselves. No, they can't, Doctor agreed. But their mother could have, at least initially. Based on the puppy's age and development, I'd estimate they were born about 4 weeks ago. The mother would have nursed them for the first few weeks, but... She trailed off, looking around the room with a trained eye. Detective understood immediately. There's no sign of another dog. No second nest, no additional food caches. Where's the mother? Doctor's expression grew somber. That's what concerns me. Female dogs typically stay with their puppies for at least 8 to 12 weeks. The fact that these puppies are only 4 weeks old and there's no mother present suggests something happened to her. She examined the puppies more closely, her assistant holding them gently. But these puppies show signs of recent nursing and care. Someone's been feeding them. Buddy, Emma said matter-of-factly, stroking the dog's head. Buddy takes care of his bobbies. The adults exchanged glances. What Emma was suggesting was technically impossible. Male dogs didn't lactate, couldn't nurse puppies. But Doctor's assistant, a young woman named Jessica, had been examining the puppy's condition closely. Doctor, look at this, Jessica said urgently. Their stomachs aren't distended from malnutrition and they're adequately hydrated. Whatever they've been eating, it's been recent and sufficient. But I'm not seeing typical signs of maternal nursing at this stage. Doctor took one of the puppies, examining its mouth and belly carefully. They've been fed something semi-solid, not just milk. See this residue around the mouth? That's partially digested meat. She looked up at Buddy with new respect. He's been regurgitating food for them. It's a behavior seen in wild canines, wolves, coyotes, where pack members will eat food elsewhere and bring it back to puppies by regurgitating it. But domestic dogs rarely do this, especially not males, and especially not without a pack structure. So he's been hunting for himself and then bringing food back for them, asked, incredulous. That's exactly what I'm saying, Doctor confirmed. Buddy's been acting as both father and mother to these puppies. When their mother disappeared, probably died, given the circumstances, he took over completely. Against every odd, against nature itself, he kept them alive. Sarah's tears flowed freely now, her hand trembling as she touched Buddy's face. You stayed for them. You could have left any time, could have come home to us, but you stayed to protect your bobbies. Buddy licked her hand, then turned his attention back to Emma, who had climbed into his lap despite Doctor's examination. The dog was painfully thin, his ribs clearly visible, his hip bones protruding, but he wrapped himself protectively around the little girl as if 6 months of separation had never happened. There's something else I need to tell you, Doctor said carefully. Buddy's not just malnourished and injured. He's also severely dehydrated, and I'm seeing signs of organ stress that suggests he's been giving whatever food and water he found to the puppies first, taking only what was left for himself. Mrs. Martinez, this dog was literally starving himself to keep those puppies alive. The weight of those words settled over everyone in the room. This wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of sacrifice that seemed almost human in its deliberate selflessness. Detective, who'd been quietly taking notes, looked up from her tablet. I need to document something for the record. Mrs. Martinez, you reported Buddy missing on April 3rd, the night of your house fire. That's exactly 6 months and 2 days ago. In my 23 years of law enforcement, I've seen maybe 3 or 4 cases where lost pets were recovered after more than 2 months. 6 months is almost unheard of, especially in an urban environment where stray dogs are typically picked up by animal control within days. He avoided everyone, interjected. I've patrolled this neighborhood for years. We've had reports of a stray dog in this area for months, but every time animal control came out, they couldn't find him. He was staying hidden, probably coming out only at night to scavenge. Because he couldn't risk being caught, Sarah realized. If animal control caught him, he'd be taken away from the puppies. Emma, who'd been quietly petting Buddy, suddenly spoke up with the simple clarity of a 3-year-old. Buddy's a good boy. He takes care of his family, just like Daddy used to take care of us before he went to heaven. The room fell silent. Sarah's late husband, Emma's father, had died 2 years ago from cancer. Emma barely remembered him, but apparently she remembered enough to recognize the same protective devotion in Buddy that her father had shown his family. Officer's fellow officer who'd been maintaining the perimeter outside appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we've got a situation developing out here. The news crews have gotten wind of what happened, and there's about 50 people gathered outside wanting to know if the little girl is okay. Social media's going crazy. The story's already been shared over 50,000 times in the last hour." Stepped outside to see a crowd that had materialized seemingly from nowhere. News vans from 3 local stations and 2 national networks lined the street. Reporters jostled for position, cameras rolling, all of them shouting questions at once. "Officer, can you confirm the child is safe? Is it true the family dog was found after 6 months? We're hearing reports about puppies. Can you comment?" Held up his hands for quiet. "I'll give you a brief statement, and then I need you all to back up and give this family some space. Yes, 3-year-old Emma Martinez has been found safe and unharmed. Yes, the family's dog who went missing during a house fire 6 months ago was also located. The details of how this happened are still being investigated, but I can tell you that what we've witnessed here today is nothing short of miraculous." Inside, Detective was coordinating with Animal Services on next steps. "Doctor, what's your medical recommendation? Can these animals be safely transported?" "Buddy needs immediate IV fluids and antibiotics for that shoulder infection," Doctor responded. "The puppies need evaluation, vaccinations, and monitoring, but they're in surprisingly good shape all things considered. I'd like to transport them all to our facility for overnight observation at minimum." "No," Emma's voice was surprisingly forceful. "Buddy stays with me. He just came back." Sarah pulled Emma close, trying to explain. "Sweetie, Buddy's very sick. The doctor needs to help him get better." "But what if he disappears again?" Emma's lower lip trembled. "What if he thinks we don't want him anymore?" Buddy, as if understanding the conversation, pressed his nose against Emma's cheek and whimpered softly. The bond between them was palpable, unbreakable. 6 months of separation had done nothing to diminish it. Doctor knelt down to Emma's level. "Emma, I promise you, Buddy's not going to disappear. I'm going to make him all better, and then he's going to go home with you and your mommy. But right now, he needs medicine and food and rest, just like when you're sick and need to feel better. Can you be brave for Buddy?" Emma looked at her mother, then at Buddy, then back at Doctor. "Will you make his go away?" "Every single one," Doctor promised. "And the puppies too." "And the puppies too." Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, but I want to visit him every day." "Every single day," Sarah confirmed, hugging her daughter tight. As Doctor and her assistant prepared transport carriers for Buddy and the puppies, Officer received a call that would add another layer to an already extraordinary story. "Here, yes, what, when? Are you certain?" His expression changed from curiosity to shock. "We'll be right there." He turned to Detective. "You're not going to believe this. Animal Control just checked their records. 5 months ago, they received a call about an aggressive stray dog at this exact address. When officers arrived, they found evidence of a female dog who'd recently given birth, blood, tissue, the whole scene. But no dog, no puppies." The mother said immediately. "Right, their assumption at the time was that the mother had moved her litter somewhere safer. They set humane traps but never caught anything. They closed the case after 2 weeks. Shook his head. What they didn't know was that Buddy was hiding here with the puppies the entire time, keeping them out of sight, avoiding the traps. For 5 months, Sarah asked incredulously. He protected them from animal control for 5 months. And probably from other predators too, Doctor added, pointing to some of Buddy's scars. These defensive wounds suggest he fought off multiple threats. Raccoons, possibly a coyote, maybe even other stray dogs. This house became his fortress, and he defended it with everything he had. Emma was now holding one of the puppies, a little female with markings similar to Buddy's. The puppy licked her nose, and Emma giggled, the first truly carefree sound she'd made since the ordeal began. "Mommy, can we keep them? Can we keep Buddy's bobbies?" Sarah looked at the 3 puppies, then at Buddy, then at her daughter's hopeful face. Their tiny apartment didn't allow pets, and they were barely scraping by financially. Keeping 4 dogs was impossible. But looking at what Buddy had sacrificed, what he'd endured to protect his family, how could she say no? "We'll figure something out," Sarah heard herself saying. "We'll find a way." Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Someone had started a social media fundraiser, Help Emma and Buddy, and in just 30 minutes, it had raised over $15,000. The community was rallying, transformed by a story of loyalty and love that transcended the ordinary. As Doctor carefully loaded Buddy into the transport carrier, Emma insisting on riding with him, Officer stood back and watched. In 15 years of police work, he'd seen the worst of humanity. But today, he'd witnessed something that restored his faith. The unbreakable bond between a child and her dog, strong enough to survive fire, separation, starvation, and 6 months of impossible odds. "Good boy," Emma whispered to Buddy as they loaded him into the veterinary van. "You're the best boy." Buddy's tail wagged weakly, his eyes never leaving the little girl who'd found him when everyone else had given up hope. Those 2 words, "good boy," had started this miracle. And they were just the beginning of an even bigger story. 3 days after Emma's rescue, the Martinez family's story had exploded across every major news network in America. Sarah's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Interview requests from Good Morning America, The Today Show, even Ellen's producers. The GoFundMe campaign had surpassed $200,000, with donations pouring in from all 50 states and 12 foreign countries. But Sarah wasn't thinking about fame or money as she sat in the waiting room of Riverside Animal Emergency Services, Emma curled up beside her clutching a stuffed dog someone had sent. They were waiting for Doctor to finish Buddy's final examination before discharge. "Mrs. Martinez," Doctor appeared in the doorway, her expression strange, not worried exactly but puzzled. "Can you come back to my office? There's something I need to discuss with you." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Is Buddy okay? The infection?" "Buddy's responding beautifully to treatment," Doctor assured her quickly. "He's gained 8 pounds, the infection is clearing, and honestly, his recovery has been remarkable. But we discovered something during our full medical workup that I need to explain to you." Emma stayed in the waiting room with Jessica, the veterinary assistant, playing with the puppies who were also recovering well. Sarah followed Doctor into a small office filled with medical charts and x-rays clipped to light boards. "Mrs. Martinez, when Buddy came to you originally, did you get him from a breeder, a rescue? Do you know anything about his background?" Sarah thought back 3 years. "We adopted him from the county shelter when he was about 2 years old. The shelter said he'd been found as a stray, no history. Why?" Doctor pulled up a chair and gestured for Sarah to sit. "When we did Buddy's blood work, we ran a full panel including a DNA test. It's standard for our records. The results came back with something unexpected." She pulled up a file on her computer. "Buddy isn't just a random mixed breed. He's got significant percentages of Belgian, German Shepherd, and Dutch Shepherd, breeds specifically used for police and military work." "I don't understand. What does that mean?" It means Buddy likely came from a working dog bloodline, possibly even a failed police or military training program. Dogs like this are bred for specific traits: intelligence, loyalty, protective instincts, and most importantly, an almost supernatural ability to track and navigate. Sarah's mind was racing. You think that's how Emma found him, his bloodline? Partially, but there's more. Doctor pulled up another screen showing a microchip registration. When we scanned Buddy for a microchip, standard procedure for any lost animal, we found one. But it wasn't registered to you or the shelter. It was registered to a private training facility in Columbus called Apex K9 Solutions. The room seemed to tilt. What? But we've had him for 3 years. The shelter scanned him when we adopted him. They said there was no chip. Microchips can migrate in the body or occasionally fail to scan properly, especially older models, Doctor explained. Our newer scanner picked it up. I called Apex K9 Solutions this morning. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Mrs. Martinez, Buddy was originally bred and trained as a search and rescue dog. He washed out of the program at 18 months old. Why did he wash out? According to their records, he was too emotionally attached to his handlers. In professional working dog programs, they need dogs who can focus on the task without becoming dependent on one person. Buddy bonded too strongly, too quickly. When his primary trainer left the program, Buddy became depressed, stopped eating, stopped working. They deemed him unsuitable for professional work and released him to a shelter for adoption. Sarah absorbed this information, pieces clicking into place. So when we adopted him, he finally found what he was looking for, a family to bond with permanently. And that bond, Mrs. Martinez, became absolutely unbreakable. Doctor pulled up another file. There's something else. I wanted to understand how Buddy survived 6 months in that abandoned house, so I had our team investigate the property and surrounding area more thoroughly. She pulled out a series of photographs taken over the past 3 days. They showed paths through the wooded area behind the house, worn smooth by repeated travel. These are Buddy's hunting routes. He established a territory of approximately 3 square miles. We found evidence of regular scavenging sites, 3 different dumpsters behind restaurants, 2 trash collection areas, and a community garden where he was taking vegetables. Vegetables? Sarah asked, surprised. Dogs are omnivores. When protein is scarce, they'll eat produce. Smart ones anyway. Doctor pointed to another photo showing scratch marks on a community center's back door. This is where it gets interesting. This community center runs a lunch program for seniors. Every Tuesday and Thursday, they put out leftover food for the local homeless population. Buddy figured this out. He was timing his scavenging runs to coincide with food availability. Sarah stared at the evidence of Buddy's intelligence and determination. He was planning, actually planning his survival. More than that, look at this timeline. Doctor laid out a calendar marked with dates. Based on the puppy's age and development, we can estimate they were born around mid-September. Buddy's scavenging patterns changed dramatically around that time. Before, he was ranging widely, sometimes going days between successful hunts. After the puppies were born, he established a predictable routine. Out at night when there was less human activity, back before dawn, never gone more than 4 hours at a time. So they wouldn't be alone too long, Sarah whispered. Exactly, and here's where it gets truly remarkable. Doctor pulled up the final piece of evidence, security footage from a gas station 3 blocks from the abandoned house. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. from 5 weeks ago. In grainy black and white, a dog could be seen at the edge of the parking lot, watching, waiting. That's Buddy, Doctor confirmed. Watch what happens next. On the screen, a truck pulled in, a delivery truck for a local grocery chain. The driver got out, went inside to pay, leaving the truck's back door partially open. Buddy waited exactly 30 seconds after the driver disappeared, then darted forward, grabbed something from the truck, and vanished into the darkness. He was stealing food, Sarah said, amazed and slightly horrified. Only from commercial trucks, never from individuals, Doctor noted, and only enough to survive. We reviewed footage from 4 different locations. Buddy was systematically raiding delivery trucks, trash containers, and donation bins, but never homes, never pets. He avoided any action that would bring him into direct contact with humans who might catch him. Sarah's throat tightened, because if he got caught, he'd be separated from the puppies, taken to a shelter, possibly euthanized if deemed aggressive. Doctor's voice was soft with respect. This dog used every bit of his search and rescue training, every survival instinct, and every ounce of intelligence to stay free and keep those puppies alive. For 6 months. A knock on the door interrupted them. Officers stood there, looking apologetic. "Doctor, Mrs. Martinez, sorry to interrupt, but we have an update. We tracked down the mother dog's history." "Please come in," Doctor said. Entered, holding a file. The female dog, the puppy's mother, was also a stray that had been living in that abandoned house. Animal control had reports of her for about 8 months before the puppies were born. She was skittish, wouldn't let anyone near her. "How did she die?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. His expression was grim. "Based on what we found at the scene and veterinary analysis, she died during or shortly after giving birth. It wasn't unusual. Stray dogs giving birth in unsafe conditions often have complications. What is unusual is that Buddy was there and took over." "But how did Buddy and this female even meet?" Sarah asked. "We think they were both using the abandoned house as shelter, probably crossing paths over several months. When she went into labor, Buddy was there. After she died, he had a choice: leave and potentially survive better on his own, or stay and try to save the puppies that weren't even biologically his." The room fell silent as the full weight of Buddy's decision settled over them. He'd chosen the harder path, the sacrificial path, for puppies that had no genetic connection to him whatsoever. "That's what I wanted to tell you," Doctor said quietly. "We ran DNA on the puppies. They're not Buddy's biological offspring. He's not their father, not genetically. But in every way that matters, he became their parent. He's been protecting and providing for another dog's puppies for over a month, at tremendous personal cost." Sarah covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "He stayed for Bobbies that weren't even his own." "It gets more profound," added. "We did some more digging into Buddy's background at Apex K9 Solutions. His training records show he was specifically trained in victim recovery and protection. When he encountered those newborn puppies next to their dying mother, every instinct from his training kicked in. They weren't just puppies to him. They were victims who needed rescue and protection." He was doing his job, Sarah realized. The job he was bred and trained for. He was saving lives. "Even at the cost of his own survival," Doctor confirmed. "Every calorie he gave those puppies was a calorie he didn't have. Every hour spent protecting them was an hour he couldn't spend hunting for himself. By the time Emma found him, Buddy was maybe 2 weeks away from organ failure due to starvation." Cleared his throat, clearly emotional. "There's one more thing. We checked Emma's medical records, with your permission, of course. Her pediatrician noted that she has an unusually heightened sense of smell. It's rare but not unheard of in young children, combined with her deep emotional bond with Buddy." "She literally smelled him from half a mile away," Sarah finished. "Through crowds of people, through city smells, through everything. She found him because their bond was that strong." "Two beings who were both exceptional," Doctor said. "A child with an extraordinary sense of smell and an unshakable bond with her dog, and a dog with professional training, exceptional intelligence, and a protective instinct so strong he'd die for Bobbies that weren't his own. When you put those two together, a miracle finished simply." Sarah thought about that moment in the abandoned house when Emma said "good boy" to a dog that should have been aggressive, dangerous, unpredictable. But Emma had known. Somehow, with a 3-year-old's pure instinct, She'd known that Buddy would never hurt her, that their bond transcended time, distance, and circumstance. "Can we see him now?" Sarah asked, wiping her eyes. Doctor smiled. "He's in the recovery room with Emma and the puppies. Fair warning, he's not going to want to leave them. Even now, after 3 days of treatment and regular food, he positions himself between the puppies and any perceived threat." They walked down the hallway to the recovery room. Through the window, Sarah could see Emma sitting on the floor, all 3 puppies tumbling over her lap while Buddy sat alert beside her, his tail wagging but his eyes watchful. The moment Buddy saw Sarah, his entire demeanor changed. The careful guardian became an excited, joyful pet. He rushed to the door, whining and pawing, desperate to greet her. "Mommy," Emma called. "Doctor says Buddy can come home today, and she says the puppies can come home in 1 more week." Sarah entered the room and immediately sank to her knees, wrapping her arms around Buddy's now slightly less emaciated frame. He licked her face frantically, his whole body wiggling with happiness. "You're a hero," Sarah whispered into his fur. "Do you know that? You're an actual hero." Buddy's tail wagged harder, and he pulled away just long enough to check on the puppies, making sure they were still safe with Emma, before returning his attention to Sarah. Officer stood in the doorway, filming the reunion on his phone. "This is going to break the internet," he muttered. He had no idea how right he was. Within 24 hours, the full story, Buddy's search and rescue background, his sacrifice for puppies that weren't his own, Emma's extraordinary tracking ability, would be headline news worldwide. But in that moment, in that quiet recovery room, none of that mattered. All that mattered was family, reunited against impossible odds. All because a little girl said 2 words, "Good boy," and meant them with her whole heart. 2 weeks after Emma's rescue, Sarah stood in the parking lot of their cramped temporary apartment, staring at the moving truck that had just pulled up. The online fundraiser had reached $347,000, and with it came something Sarah had thought impossible: a real home. The community had in ways she never could have imagined. A local real estate agent, moved by their story, had found them a small 3-bedroom house with a fenced yard and convinced the landlord to waive the pet deposit entirely. A furniture company donated everything they needed. Even the moving company refused payment. "Mommy, is this really ours?" Emma asked, clutching her stuffed dog as she stared at the modest blue house with white trim. Buddy stood beside her, healthy now after 2 weeks of proper nutrition and medical care, his coat beginning to shine again. The 3 puppies, which Emma had named Hope, Lucky, and Miracle, tumbled around their feet, exploring their new territory with puppy enthusiasm. "It's really ours, baby," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Forever this time." Officer pulled up in his patrol car, off-duty but unable to miss this moment. Detective arrived minutes later with a box of pizza housewarming gift, she called it. Doctor came with special dietary instructions for Buddy's continued recovery. Even Mrs. Henderson from the farmer's market showed up with homemade cookies. But the person who surprised Sarah most was the woman who stepped out of a sleek black SUV 30 minutes into the move-in chaos. She was in her mid-50s, athletic build, with short gray hair and piercing blue eyes. She walked with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm Captain Rachel from Apex K9 Solutions." She extended her hand. "I'm the one who originally trained Buddy." Sarah shook her hand, confused. "I don't understand. Doctor said Buddy washed out of your program years ago." "He did," Captain confirmed, her gaze moving to where Buddy was carefully supervising the puppy's exploration of the front yard. "Biggest mistake I ever made. May I?" She gestured toward Buddy. "Of course." Captain approached slowly, speaking softly. "Buddy, remember me, boy." Buddy's ears perked up. He turned, cocked his head, then suddenly his tail began wagging furiously. He bounded over to Captain, who dropped to one knee and accepted his enthusiastic greeting with obvious emotion. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, scratching behind his ears exactly the way he liked. "Look at you. Look what you did." Emma ran over, protective. "That's MY buddy." Captain smiled at the little girl. "You're absolutely right. He's your buddy now. But he used to be my student, and I came to apologize to him and to you." "Apologize for what?" Sarah asked. Captain stood, keeping one hand on Buddy's head. "In our program, we train dogs to save lives. Search and rescue, disaster response, missing persons. It's intense work that requires specific traits: intelligence, focus, endurance, and emotional control." She looked down at Buddy. "This dog had everything except that last one. He bonded too deeply with me, his primary trainer. When I left the program to take a promotion, he stopped eating, stopped working. We thought it meant he was too emotionally dependent to be reliable in the field." "So you released him to a shelter," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "We did, and I've regretted it every day since." Captain's voice was rough with emotion. "What I didn't understand then, what I understand now after hearing his story, is that his weakness was actually his greatest strength. Buddy didn't fail because he couldn't do the job. He failed because he cared too much about doing the job right." Officer, listening from nearby, stepped closer. "What do you mean?" "Search and rescue dogs are trained to find victims and alert their handlers," Captain explained. "But Buddy didn't just want to find victims, he wanted to save them, to protect them, to stay with them until help arrived. In training scenarios, when we'd plan a victim for him to find, he wouldn't just bark and return to me. He'd refuse to leave the victim's side. We thought it was a flaw. We thought he didn't understand his job." "But he understood it perfectly," Doctor said softly, having joined the group. "He just had a different definition of rescue." "Exactly." Captain looked at Buddy with profound respect. "When he found those newborn puppies with their dying mother, he didn't just alert someone else. He stayed. He became the rescue. He put his own survival on the line to protect lives that weren't even his responsibility. That's not a failed search and rescue dog. That's the best damn search and rescue dog I've ever seen." Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. "You came all this way to tell him that?" "I came to offer you something," Captain said. She pulled an envelope from her jacket. "Inside is a lifetime certificate of achievement from Apex K9 Solutions, officially recognizing Buddy as a master-level search and rescue dog. It comes with full veterinary coverage for life, annual health checks, and a small monthly stipend for his care." Sarah opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an official certificate with Buddy's name, his microchip number, and a gold seal. Below it was a letter outlining benefits totaling over $500 per month, plus complete medical coverage. "I can't accept this," Sarah whispered. "It's too much." "You're not accepting it. Buddy earned it." Captain's tone left no room for argument. "What he did, keeping himself and 3 puppies alive for 6 months using nothing but his training and instinct, is exactly what we train our dogs to do in disaster scenarios. Survive, protect, persist until rescue comes. He did it perfectly. He deserves recognition." Emma tugged on Captain's sleeve. "Does this mean Buddy's a hero, like a real hero?" Captain knelt down to Emma's level. "Sweetheart, Buddy is the most heroic dog I've ever known, and I've worked with hundreds of them." "I told Mommy he was a good boy," Emma said proudly, "even when everyone thought he was a scary dog." "You knew," Captain said gently. "Somehow, you knew exactly who he really was." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Volunteers helped move furniture into the house. Buddy explored every room, his tail wagging constantly, seemingly understanding that this was permanent. The puppies claimed the sunny spot in the living room as their favorite napping place. By evening, the house was beginning to look like a home. Sarah stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as Emma played in the backyard with Buddy and the puppies. Officer was teaching Emma how to properly throw a ball for the dogs. Detective was assembling a dog bed that was probably nicer than Sarah's own mattress. "Quite a day," Doctor said, appearing beside Sarah with 2 cups of coffee. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," Sarah admitted. "6 months ago, I lost everything in a fire. My home, my dog, nearly my daughter. I was working double shifts just to afford our terrible apartment and wondering how I'd ever give Emma a real childhood again. And now I have a house, a healthy daughter, 4 dogs that are basically celebrities, and a community that showed up when I needed them most." Sarah shook her head in wonder. How did this happen? "A 3-year-old girl who loved her dog enough to find him against impossible odds," Doctor said simply. "And a dog who loved his family enough to survive the unsurvivable." Through the window, they watched as Buddy suddenly stopped playing, his body going alert. He was staring toward the back fence where the property bordered a wooded area. His stance was protective, placing himself between Emma and whatever he'd sensed. "Still on duty," Doctor observed. "Even here, even safe, he's still protecting her." A deer emerged from the woods, paused, then bounded away. Buddy relaxed immediately, his tail resuming its happy wag. False alarm, but he'd been ready. "Will he ever stop?" Sarah asked. "Will he ever really relax?" "That's who he is," Doctor said. "It's not trauma or hypervigilance, it's purpose. Buddy knows his job, and his job is keeping his family safe. You can't train that out of him. You shouldn't want to." Later that night, after everyone had left and Sarah was tucking Emma into bed, a real bed, in a real room in their real house, Emma asked the question that had been on her mind all day. "Mommy, why did Buddy stay with those puppies when he could have come home to us?" Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Because Buddy has something very special inside him. It's called love, but it's a kind of love that's bigger than just us. When he saw those puppies who needed help, he couldn't leave them, even though he missed us, even though it was hard, because that's what heroes do. They help people who need them, even when it costs them something. Like Daddy did when he was sick," Emma said quietly. "He stayed with us as long as he could, even though being sick hurt him." Sarah's breath caught. Emma rarely talked about her father. "Yes, sweetheart, just like Daddy." "So Buddy's like Daddy. A hero who loves us so much he'd do anything to keep us safe." "Yes, baby, exactly like that." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm glad I found him. I'm glad I followed the butterfly and said good boy even when he looked scary." "Why weren't you scared?" Sarah asked, the question that had haunted her since that day. Emma looked at her like the answer was obvious. "Because I knew it was Buddy. I could feel it in my heart, and Buddy would never hurt me. He loves me." Such simple faith, such absolute trust, and she'd been completely right. Sarah kissed Emma's forehead and turned off the light. As she left the room, she saw Buddy already stationed outside Emma's door, lying across the threshold like a furry guardian. The 3 puppies were piled against his side, already asleep. "Good boy, Buddy," Sarah whispered, stepping carefully over him. "You're finally home." Buddy's tail thumped once against the floor, but he didn't move from his post. Some duties were forever. Some bonds couldn't be broken. And some heroes walked on 4 legs, asking nothing in return except the chance to protect the ones they loved.